Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media here, and of course we are joined by John Sneisen. And without further ado, we are joined over Skype by Anthem Blanchard, who I'm very excited to talk to. He is a CEO and president of Anthem Vault, and this man is brilliant. And I've actually thoroughly enjoyed the research I did leading to this interview, watching his YouTube videos, and not to mention watching him attempt to teach mainstream media reporters basic economics, to which they, of course, cannot comprehend beyond their badly rehearsed theater talking points, is incredibly enjoyable, incredibly enjoyable. And Anthem has a very interesting history and is someone kids should look up to. Like, really, guys, his success and ability to learn and put that information to action is quite inspirational. Welcome to World Alternative Media, Anthem.
Josh, I thank you so much, and John, always a pleasure. And yeah, I don't know how I can live up to that type of introduction, but it's a pleasure to be on your program. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you. So now, Anthem, before we dig into the global markets and the insanity of what we're seeing right now, can you tell our viewers a bit about your background, the work you've been involved in, and how you got an awesome middle name like Hayek? I know your father was quite the pioneer.
Yeah, they're just basically the luck of the draw for me having amazing parents and role models. Dad was a pioneer, really pushed for the legalization of gold ownership for U.S. citizens to be able to own gold because it was made illegal in 1933. And then Bill with my mother, the largest gold business, coin business in the world, Blanchard and Company, which that was in the family for many years until they sold the business. And so great lineage. And so really, my passion really has been kind of a continuation to just continue to make gold accessible to all of humankind and mankind. And so, that's really my aspiration, and really make, value and store of value accessible to people, and financial services accessible to people, money accessible to people. So that's really a passion. So that's kind of how I found myself in this space with Anthem Vault, which is, what our company does is just really work toward that end, and we do it through different forms of innovation. So that making it as accessible, the value of that metal as accessible as possible, and the most trusted way and secured ways as possible. So it's a wonderful team, and it's been a lot of fun to watch the innovation at Anthem Vault. So
Absolutely. Well, with a middle name like Hayek, there you must have had a long background in researching the message of liberty. Now, what attracts you most about the message of liberty?
yeah, I think just the idea that free will, and the idea that I personally like to think, whenever I can remind myself of this, that everyone I ever meet will always do many things better than I will ever be able to do. And I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind. And I think, it's all about learning. We can all, I think it comes down to, we all have multiple things to learn from each other, and from each other, and, and to teach others. And so I think that's really where, liberty, I think, comes in terms of, no one knows what's better for you than you. And I think that's really what it comes down to. And I think, the only places that I think you can even really make an argument of where there should be some kind of structure is in terms of, what happens in impassioned situations. Perhaps it can all be dealt with through private contract. I think the jury's still out on that, potentially. It might work, but we at least need to transition, I think, toward, much more decided by, disagreements between parties, decided amongst parties, and just less government intervention, I think, and free choice, where we don't need regulators telling us that, we need to have heavily licensed industries to protect us, because, we now have a lot more transparency and understanding, and just the media. Just the democratization of media through the internet, where everyone can use, all of these different video apps and software editing, and just be able to, be your own producer. It's enabled this proliferation, I think, of much more efficient learning, because it's just spawned this creativity, where before it was all just shackled with, you had to, get an education degree or whatever the
Yeah.
prerequisites are for being a teacher, in a high school or university. So, I mean, it's just, I think all these things are liberty. I think it's personal
Mhm.
agency, the right to do what your body, what you'd like to. I think it's the ability to, make a living doing pretty much, what you want to do, as long as you're not, directly inflicting harm on somebody else. And, at the very least, I think, if that's, probably should be about the limit of you know, government, at least in terms of a local level, in my opinion. But at the same time, I think, who am I to say and judge? And I think that's one of the brilliance of having, people can vote with their feet in the United States with going to different states or, outside of the
Mhm.
country, although that's getting more expensive. And I think that's something, it's never a good idea. Government should always be looking to get more toward the people, and and not try to restrict people's flow. So,
Yeah.
um,
And with every good idea come collectivists that try to co-opt the good ideas. And I wanted to kind of go into this quickly because someone that comes to mind is George Soros to me. And now I know you used to work at goldmoney.com and really revolutionized the company to where it is today. Now, they were bought out by Big Gold, which George Soros is involved in. What do you think of that sale and the motives of those involved, considering George Soros's history?
you know, um, it's a good question, Josh. In
Mhm.
fairness, I haven't met George Soros. I have not met the executives. I am a shareholder still technically,
Mhm.
because of the transaction, the nature of the transaction, where it was a lockup involved. I don't have visibility. I mean, I just know statements that have been made. I just find it like fascinating personally, in
Mhm.
that it seems like the idea of having choice in currency and private currency is doesn't seem compatible to me with having a one world kind of umbrella global government construct. But um, maybe there's something that I'm missing. I mean, it just it seems it seems interesting to me.
Yeah.
So
Well, you've got freedom on your mind, and I can only understand the kind of situation where you're coming from in that. And I won't go too far into that. I could understand that you as a shareholder, you're not going to go too far into that. But I was wondering about what your thoughts are on the global paper currency paradigm, central bank manipulation, and the effects it has on the monetary system.
yeah, I mean, I think we see it in terms of just the devaluation of fiat currency, and it just buys less, and ultimately, in cost inflation numbers are really underestimated, and I think they have to be, because real wage increases are flat, and it completely dissolves the narrative of government spending slash Keynesian economics, or this idea that you can have, spending and stimulus and central bank stimulus, on top of it, and really achieve some kind of greater goal of which is what happens all the time in the private sector, of course, from companies that people love. And, and there are distortions there too. I mean, we all live in a vast, like a world where there's a lot of state-led involvement. I mean, even looking at innovative companies like Tesla, right? I mean, there's a lot of government money there. I mean, look at the big universities like the ones, like Stanford. I mean, there's lots of government grants going on, that are had through programs and research programs. And so, um, it's a world that it's inflicted with all of this government, um, really just manipulative action through the flow of funds, really. And so it just is what it is. So,
And we've certainly found ourselves in kind of a world of perpetual debt enslavement due to excessive printing and devaluation and inflation. And it really, what we're looking at as money these days isn't really money; it's simply currency. It's a far cry from the original principles of, say, in the United States. The idea of actual gold as your physical currency, something you could hold in your hand, something that preserves value. And now, John, you had a question for Anthem here.
Yeah, it's great to talk to you again, Anthem. We had a great time last time we met down with Freedom Force in Paso Robles. But I have a question about the quantitative easing, which was so-called a program that the bankers thought would be a great way, and this is back to Keynesian economics, that they believe printing money and then monetizing the debt is a great thing, and then also buying back bad and debt that goes bankrupt and so on from the banks to keep their balance sheets clean, so that it doesn't look really like they're going bad. It just is a clean slate for them, and they get away with that. Now, what is your thoughts on quantitative easing and what's happening around the world with that?
Yeah, I mean, great question, and I think it's just a necessity of keeping the system afloat. Ultimately, I mean, there's two ways you go about things: bail-ins and bail-outs, quote unquote, right? So we've seen bail-ins in Cyprus, for example, where there were haircuts ultimately, and still restrictions in place in terms of funds being accessible to depositors. So, and you see that those kinds of actions, and then we see actions where if you have a fiscal alignment with a monetary policy, I would think that the majority of the time you'll see bailouts, like we saw famously in 2008, globally 2009, and through quantitative easing. And so I think that's the easy way to go. Ultimately. Maybe at some point there'll be like some sort of bail-in just to try to spook all the banks and just people psychologically into thinking that maybe there is some accountability here, because really bail-in really should be more like, well, there's accountability because certain banks have better practices than other banks and have better capital ratios, and therefore are less risky, and it should all be based on independent interest rates. But all the financial system is manipulated because of fractional reserve central banking that's global, and through the Federal Reserve, through the U.S. dollar as a function of Bretton Woods post World War II. So I mean, these are just facts, and because of that, I think really the world is yearning for new solutions. They're yearning for decentralized solutions that don't have systemic risk. But the reality is, I think too, I mean, the reality is we live in a world that does have regulatory bodies that they have different laws and in terms of regulations and knowing clients and preventing or trying to prevent against money laundering. And that's where it's been a lot of education, and be able to say, well, actually these new technologies allow a lot more transparency. So it's actually a lot less likely that there'll be as many issues as there are in banks, for example, when it comes to money laundering. I mean, there's so many fines, and just the volumes and just the accountability. The systems are so much older; they're legacy systems. So it's a lot easier to have there be accountability, but at the same time be layers of people can go through other networks. But if someone ultimately wants to do enough sleuthing, then someone can probably do an IP trail, if they really wanted to badly enough, just like with any kind of detective work in history. So, but I think it does enable, I think, a little bit more of a checks and balances system in terms of where are the lines, and are warrants needed to get certain information, and just from a functional standpoint, I mean, there's so much regulation now. I mean, it's kind of like you have on the one side banks and all the complexity there and all the special treatments that they get in terms of their type of accounting, and and how they're treated legally. And then you have all these regulations that are kind of fight that have been building and building for decades now, 100 plus years. And it's like these two forces, and they're both not really productive forces. So yeah, I mean, I think people are really yearning for new stores of value and asset-based stores of value, and I think that's really what we provide with Anthem Vault and our Hayek Gold innovation, our gold warehouse receipt that we had launched a beta of, and we're planning to relaunch in the next in the next few months here, and a better version, and we're really excited about that. So just really trying to help people prepare for what's coming. So
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit more about the Hayek coin? I read just briefly about that. You were involved in that, and can you just explain what you're trying to do with it and how the system is supposed to work?
yeah, our team built basically the first gold digital gold warehouse receipt that people can basically move around on blockchain on it. And we chose for the first implementation a layer on top of the Bitcoin blockchain. It was called Counterparty. And so we're looking at another layer. I don't want to announce it yet because we haven't gone public with it, but it's very we've seen other implementations that have been successful. So we're excited about it, and basically it'll be better, more cost effective, more time efficient, and basically the idea is that someone just like a warehouse receipt that have been around for hundreds of years, instead of just being able to transfer that to someone else, and then upon delivery they have to identify themselves, and then they can then take possession of the metal. Very similarly, the Hayek allows the same type of action, but just digitally. So, digitally, transferable and divisible. Upon redemption, it has to be vetted, and upon issuance, it has to be vetted. So, that's where all of the know your client, any money laundering provisions come in, and all the compliance comes in. And so it's taking an old concept. It's the old goldsmith. It's the origins of banking, back before banks were so over leveraged and really caused a lot of this potential for systemic risk, and these trillions of dollars of bailouts in the forms of just direct bailouts or quantitative easing or long-term loans or what have you. But all bailouts, the same, and that's a cost of society. I mean, that's a good cost to all of us and our time in life. So, that's the fight I think that people are starting to wake up to. And I think, there are movies like The Big Short that are starting to get closer and closer to the subject matter. Of course, G. Edward Griffin, as we know, masterpiece, The Creature from Jekyll Island. And really, books before and that preceded, and I think that's the excitement of the internet, and just getting the opportunity to be on an interview with you all, just to help further educate and inform and just get the knowledge out there.
Mm-hmm. And there's a huge push today for a cashless society, and it's mostly by people, more of the collectivist influences in society. What do you think of this idea of a cashless society?
Well, I mean, I think just like anything that if that gets banned, that there will be a black market created, and I think it's just going to make virtual assets, virtual currencies of all sorts, on decentralized networks like Bitcoin, or cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, or cryptographic receipts like Hayek's, so warehouse receipts like Hayek's, Hayek Gold. I think you're going to see more and more demand, because ultimately there's a function. I mean, cash serves a function in society. It protects society against central planning, number one. I mean, because that's ultimately, the reason that central banks want to ban cash, really more, I think, even in governments from a taxation standpoint, is because the central banks want to influence monetary policy in order to help the major commercial banks. Because just like every regulatory body, what ends up happening, whether it starts or just ends up happening this way, is that it's just a regulatory body that ends up benefiting the industry it's supposed to regulate. So, at least the largest, most dominant players that will benefit the most. So, I think that's, important for, to kind of keep in mind. And I think that was once understood by a small, percentage of people in the relative population. And I think now what you're seeing with the success of, candidates as varied as, Donald Trump and to Bernie Sanders in the U.S. presidential election is a reaction to, people saying we understand the game well enough to understand that we're being gamed. And even if we don't fully understand a lot of the reasons why, like we understand that the majority of the time when things, quote unquote, are getting enacted, that more often than not, it's not going to be to me, Joe Q public's benefit, every man's benefit, and it's going to be to the benefit of a small percentage of people or interest. And I mean, it's just a common sense. You don't have to have a PhD, in government affairs and to figure out that this is not a sustainable way to be productive. I mean, it's a function of we all have a finite amount of time.
Yeah, and there
spends.
Oh, sorry. Well, I was just gonna say, like, there is this kind of push because it's nice to see that so many people realize that they are being screwed. It's just many of the solutions that they provide lead to the very problems, and we can call that the Hegelian dialectic. And basically, what I've been watching a lot of is with Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. A lot of people are saying, well, these rich people, they're the problem. We need to regulate them. We got to regulate them, not realizing that the more you regulate the rich, the less employees, the less production, the more poor people that will be created out of that. And it's unfortunate that so many people can see the problem, but provide the absolute wrong solutions that will only make the problems worse. And we see that all over society today, especially from the Bernie Sanders crowd.
Yeah. What you see, Anthem, is you see what is getting enacted is, well, let's go after these businesses. Well, the problem is who they're attacking, really. The number one is the small, medium-sized businesses, which is the backbone of the economy. They're not, like attacking the 0.01% up at the top that can benefit from all of this and never would pay taxes because they're implemented in and they work with the system itself. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's something that I just really want to put out to the viewers because I understand the anger. I'm angry too. I think most people are angry with the way that society works today, or doesn't work for that matter. And we just have to be careful about the solutions we provide. Many things sound good, but don't necessarily add up to the end goal that we all want. And before we get into gold, Anthem, I wanted to ask about this crazy notion among many of the most nefarious people in politics and banking that creating a world currency is a good idea. I personally think they're just evil and want to create a world of absolute debt slaves. But what do you think of the push for one world currency?
I mean, I think it's a really bad idea. And and I'll preface that by saying, I mean, I do think that gold, from everything that I know in history, I think it makes for the best currency. But that said, I don't think that gold should be implemented de facto on a global basis as the only currency, because, and the reason for that, and if we were all robots and not humans, I'd say, yeah, that's a good idea. But because we're all humans, that I think it's a bad idea, because every single instance in history of a centralized currency has always resulted in a fiat fractional reserve currency every single time. So, and there's thousands of instances. So, we know, I mean, even if we do a few things over and over again incorrectly, then, it's a conscious decision that we decide, and it's insane. So this is exactly the same instance, and that's really, the origin of my middle name you brought up, Friedrich August Hayek. And actually, as my mother, little known fact that actually paid for the naming rights of my name in silver dollars. My dad were Morgan, Carson cities, and so and basically that was the naming right August Hayek believed in choice in currency and was a Nobel Prize winner and believed in denationalization of money because he witnessed central bank policy and directly in the Bank of England and Federal Reserve, at least directly in terms of advising directly, and just saw that central bank through political pressures alone, would never be able to actually adhere to guidelines and guideposts. So you realize it was a fool's errand, and that money needs to be freed, and it needs to be in away from the government monopoly. And that means legal tender laws need to be abolished, and it means that there needs to be choice, that government can't mandate a certain bank or a certain script to be legal be some kind of legal tender or some kind of equivalent. So
Absolutely. And you make a really good point. And of course, we have to make the point that paper currency historically has always reverted to its natural value of zero. It always has. And there's no sign of that ever changing. It's just basic mathematics, and it just can't work. And I want to mention to the viewer that we are experiencing a little bit of choppiness in the connection, but you can't blame us too much. 10 years ago, this would have been a multi-million-dollar operation just to get a live stream going. So just bear with us a little bit. But I wanted to ask Anthem, because the mainstream media is always claiming the absurd that gold will fall and that somehow gold is bad insurance. It's a pet peeve of anyone who spends a moment researching the history of gold. So for those that don't understand, why does gold preserve so much value, and why does doubt still exist after everything we've seen over the years?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the simple answer is that gold can't be recreated by man. Gold can be, easily formed. It's very low melting point, which means lower cost energy to remake it. It has a unique color. It's the most malleable of all metals, which means the most bendable without breaking. Which that quality with its color make it really great wearable jewelry and wearable art, ultimately in jewelry. And so that, I think, for those reasons, I mean, it's also a high tech metal in the sense of lasers and aerospace because of its properties, and it's also very highly conductive, and it doesn't tarnish like a silver or copper. And so when even though silver and copper have better rates of conductivity, especially relative to scarcity, that the reason why wires are gold plated is because gold doesn't corrode, so or doesn't have that patina. So that's those are kind of the very kind of from scientific to also industrial reasons that because copper, iron, non-ferrous metals, nickel are more abundantly used during economic boom cycles and credit boom cycles, and a lot less used during credit bust cycles. Their price fluctuates a lot more wildly than gold, where the 90% roughly of gold is purchased just for investment and saving store of value purposes. So, and a much smaller percent is purchased for industrial purposes. And so for those reasons, there's a lot more stability in the price because there's a lot more above ground reserve, in terms of its relative, relative value, relative to other stockpiles and their relative value of metals. So, those are the main reasons why gold has been the winner really in terms of the most used form of currency, with silver, and silver as well. You can argue silver is good money too. It's just silver prices or silver relative value has been more in modern times more volatile than gold has to other commodities and materials and services.
Yeah, silver has fluctuated wildly over the years. However, of course, it has always kept a preserved value. And I always make the point that in the 1910s, people were getting a silver coin an hour, which would be worth to around $15 to $16 to $17 an hour today. And that's real preservation of value. And I think that should stand, people should understand how important that is. And when people are yelling about their minimum wage hike, they should really consider the money more over than, the regulations. There's an answer to everything, and we need to pay attention. And why do you think, though, that there's so much doubt still regarding gold and silver, for that matter? I mean, it's really annoying watching people in the mainstream media try and argue with you about gold when you have the history in your hands.
Well, I think that it's more and more at risk. And by the way, I do like silver. I mean, even more than gold right now. I mean, I think on a relative basis, I mean, the ratio is about 80-1, so just maybe a little below that. But I really like silver a lot. I think it's because the more you have to lose, the more you fight for what, lose. And I think, as I mean, the biggest banks' balance sheets are bigger, by what I've at least 30 some odd percent than they were back in early 2008. And so I think that's one of the biggest reasons, Josh, is that it just, the more you have to lose, the more kind of frantic the situation becomes. And so I think that that's the reality. I mean, I think there's a reason why Bitcoin got adopted, and there's a reason why financial technology is so popular right now. And it's need-based. This is other business service, right? The more of a need that there is, then the more demand. You're going to start seeing supply solutions. So at Anthem Vault, our team is super excited and honored to help provide humanity and our clients, individual clients at Anthem Vault, our service. So, we accept Bitcoin, we accept wires, we accept direct debits. So, we have a Amagi Metals site that, it was one of the leaders, one of the first coin dropship companies out there to accept Bitcoin. So for coins in your hands, for people that want some in your home safe, Amagi Metals is great. And so, yeah, I mean, that's cool, just to try to provide people with that they can trust and innovation. So, and keep making the metal more accessible to possible, so everyone can enjoy the best value that they can do the most with, and not have it just restricted to a very small elite percentage of people globally.
Absolutely. And you've obviously proven your ability to really revolutionize the market. And I think it's quite incredible, the work that you've done. I just wanted to know what worries you most about the future and what gives you optimism.
I think what worries me most is kind of the desperation of a lot of the oligarchs, and what doubling down on bad positions, I think, worries me the most potentially, or doubling down on bad ideology worries me the most. I think that's the biggest danger that we all have as humanity's sake, and kids and nieces and nephews and such, and their kids, and that's what scares me the most. But I think what gets me the most excited is the fact that we have this disintermediation of communication that's occurred because of the internet, and the cost of communication has come down by tens of thousands of times for the last 30 years alone. So, I mean, that's what excites me. I mean, just think about the equivalent of having to have phone calls, having to mail bills, or having to mail correspondence with people, or calling people back and forth, versus all that are much more tailor-made functional forms of communication for so much less. And so that really excites me. And I think you just see how much innovation, how much knowledge we're also all gathering, and it's not just one-way communication. I mean, so I think we've gone from pretty much all of recorded history, from these hierarchical pyramid structures that were very centralized, very heavy, systemic, and now we're going to these decentralized web-based approaches where there isn't systemic risk, and risk is cost. So that excites me. I mean, that's safer. It provides for a lot less French revolutions and Russian revolutions and major wars and civil wars and a calamity, because literally webs are like trampoline as a web. They're safety nets. So instead of a hierarchy where it's like a pyramid scheme, and nothing destructs. And so that's really what we've been stuck with through most of humanity. And I think but for reasons why, mainly was because we needed those kinds of economies of scale because we didn't have the technology. So just the brute force to overcome like technology lapses and the costs associated just required lots of effort, lots of human labor, lots of energy. So we've learned how to be so much more efficient through innovation, and that's this reality. So it's just exciting. So I mean, you can't deny, right? Even through all of the negativity, I mean, we still live relative to people 100 years ago so much better, even despite all of the onerous aspects and centralization and in terms of a devaluation of currency and over-regulation and all these things that we have. So technology and private innovation has still overcome. So creation of value is always going to overcome usurpation of value. If there is, I don't know if that word exists, but
oh, totally. And since we're on the optimistic side, Anthem, I wanted to ask you, because I know you're involved with something that I'm really excited about, which is the creation of, through Freedom Force International, what's called the Red Pill Expo. And me and Josh were members of Freedom Force, and we're very excited about what is going on and what you guys are doing. I wish I could have been down there to be there and see the whole process, because we really want to put this event into Canada and get it here. So could you, is there anything you can tell us, little tidbits of what you guys discussed?
Yeah, no, I can. I'll drop some that we're looking at November, so before things is what we're looking at. So and we're not sure on the we're calling it Freedom Force Expo right now. There's been about Red Pill, and we realized that we might be a lot older than we realized because the Matrix is almost 20 years old. We thought maybe we should start asking some millennials and millennials what they think. So just to try to make sure we have audience and the young audience, really the transition audience. I got from our current systems to the new systems, and they really have the biggest responsibility, I think, just for themselves to be part of the solution. So. But so we're looking, and I mean that there's a lot of enthusiasm. Some of the health groups that some of the members of Freedom Force are associated with, Lane and John, are pretty eager too. So I know that Ed was on Alex Jones' show. That was something that Ed had sent out. So. Obviously he's, pretty much as all-star as it gets in the alternative media world. And I think, being a lot of these, alternative media kind of, enlighteners, for this, perspective that you're not going to just get, pushed from a one-way source. I think it's going to be really exciting. I think there's going to be a lot of enlightenment and education and knowledge and passion, and I think that about the will and really being action driven. I think ultimately voting with your money, voting with your time, that really is what it's all about. So I think it'll be fun. It's going to be a lot of fun. I think that was something that was also discussed, is making sure that it's entertaining, and I know that it's going to be a massive success, so I'm excited about it.
It's really interesting to see people getting these kinds of things together. It's really exciting. It does give me that optimism that you kind of talk about the future. And of course, J. Edward Griffin is the man, and we can't forget that here at WHAM. We've spoken with him a few times, and he is just an incredible human being. And I always want to tell the viewer that the only person that's going to change the world is you. We can't sit and wait for someone else to do it for us. It all comes down to us as individuals to stand up and do something in any way, shape, or form to whatever capacity we can. It's always worth it in the long run, because if every single one of us do a little bit, then we're going to be living in a much better world than we are today. And Anthem, it's been an honor speaking with you. Can you tell our viewers how they can support the work you do and some of your future projects that are coming up?
Pleasure. Yeah, well, check us out at anthemvault.com. Yeah, that's a great place. You can check out, sign up for an account, so it's free. We're excited about what we're offering. We're constantly innovating, and constantly putting our product out there to get more of the world. And it's a process. So we love for our clients to be a part of that process. So that's what's fun too. We are really receptive of our clients. So we have some cool content on our blog, some really interesting, catchy work. A lot of young bloggers mainly. So it's very fresh content. Check out what we're up to. I mean, we love all media. We love mainstream media. I mean, we do a lot of mainstream media. So I mean, I'm a big believer in bridging and bridges. I mean, you can't. At the end of the day, you have to see, is someone amoral, or is someone, what is someone being devious, or would someone be willing to be sinister? But I think other than once you kind of have those considerations of someone a sociopath, psychopathic behavior, then I think it's just about bridging. Disagreements are just differences of views and perception and perspective, and so it's just about educating, and then really it's made the best knowledge and thought process prevail. So I think that's really what we owe it to everyone, because I think ultimately statism is force. I mean, right, we understand that statism doesn't work because it's forced coercion, and that ultimately you have to get to more of a voluntarist approach. And I think that I still have questions about like a pure anarchist society. I have questions about it, but I think there's a lot of deregulation and just being able to terminate a lot of just useless relics of regulation, and just more decentralization. I mean, we just don't need the economies of scale of massive government and massive government appointed institutions in order to achieve very large systems, especially in money and finance anymore. So and so I think that's key. So, and anthemvault.com, please check us out. And yeah, it's a real pleasure, guys. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, John. It's a real honor to be on your show.
And it's an honor to speak with you, Anthem. And of course, as he mentioned, voluntarism. Everyone can have their own point of view, and we don't all agree on the exact same kind of society that we want to live in, but we should all be able to opt out. We should all be able to opt in as well. We should all have the kind of world that we want to live in without force or coercion against other individuals. So, if, for example, if you want to live in a socialist kind of community, then you have your socialist community over here, or this person has their libertarian community over there, and et cetera, as long as you aren't using force to force someone into doing something that they don't want to be part of. It's all down to the individual. And of course, a lot can be said about, maybe a socialist voluntarist society might not work because, they don't have people to force to pay for it. But that's a story for another day. But it's a great idea to at least consider and look into. And of course, it's not very often, and it's very refreshing, by the way, to hear someone at the stature that Anthem is speaking about such an interesting idea, which is a message of freedom. And it's odd that we don't hear about that from too many people anymore. But you know what? It's starting to grow again. The message of freedom is starting to grow again, and people are starting to think, hey, maybe I own myself. Hey, maybe I'm not part of a collective, part of a government. Maybe I control the government. The government doesn't control me. And that's a very important, subject that we should all be looking at and all be working towards as individuals. So thank you very much, Anthem. It was great talking with you. This is Josh Sigurdson and John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth. Be the change.